why I tend to, outside of the angel investing stuff, I am extremely concentrated with the things that I buy. But everyone has their own strategy. I personally think that staked ETH is a good strategy because I believe ETH is a store of value and a money. I know that's maybe a controversial topic for certain people, but I believe it is. I believe it is on par with BTC in that respect. It's just behind because it hasn't existed for, I guess, like 6 years of BTC's life. So it's behind in like liquidity profile, network effect, all that sorts of stuff. But BTC and ETH are the only things that I would consider to be something that I would hold for decades, right? And ETH to me is superior, not just because of staking, but because I just like obviously much more bullish on the Ethereum ecosystem as a whole and driving value to ETH than I am on Bitcoin. But I think either or is like, you can't really go wrong in that respect from a preservation perspective.
Crypto expert Anthony Sassano is incredibly bullish on both Bitcoin and Ethereum for 2024 and into the future. However, he believes Ethereum offers the better risk to reward, and almost all his entire net worth is made up of ETH. For those who don't know Sassano, he's a crypto expert and an OG in the space with over a decade spent in crypto. He's made tens of millions of dollars in crypto, so he knows his stuff. In his latest interview, he broke down how he sees the next crypto cycle playing out and what effect a Bitcoin and Ethereum ETF will have on markets. Make sure to stick around to the end of the video where Anthony breaks down why he's so ridiculously bullish on Ethereum. Also guys, if you want to stay most up to date on the crypto world, I send out a daily 5-minute crypto newsletter that covers expert predictions, on-chain data breakdowns, and breaking news, all for free. Click the first link in the description, enter your email, and join over 20,000 others to become a better crypto investor right now. Now here's Anthony Sassano with why he's so bullish.
You saw that. So the wealth effect in crypto, I think, is much more pronounced than it is outside of crypto because it happens so quickly, where people can go from literally having nothing to having millions in 6 months, a year, right? You can go from like 2020, for example, the beginning of 2020 was still like the bear market. Like we had just done 2019, where it was still another brutal year. ETH was like $130 at the beginning of 2020. And then by the end of 2020, I think ETH was like $700-800. And then after that, a couple months after that, it was 2,000, 3,000, right? So because it happened so quickly, people come into so much wealth, it doesn't feel real, right? It doesn't feel like you're going to lose it either. So you start being a total degen and you start just buying everything and thinking, oh, nothing, everything's going to go up forever. It's a super cycle, as they mean. Yeah, up only. Yeah. And I think that's another thing that I typically warn people about with crypto bull markets is that every single bull market is the same thing where everyone says that there's not going to be another bear market. Like, of course there is. Because unless everyone decides not to sell, right, prices can't go up forever. Like, that's just not how markets work. Yeah. It's just crazy to me. And I think people are once again still convincing themselves of this right now because of the ETF stuff with BTC getting an ETF and probably ETH not far behind. They're saying, oh, with an ETF, money's always going to be flowing in because ETFs are part of retirement accounts. And like, okay, that's true to some extent. But remember that the majority of BTC buyers are not doing it through the ETF this cycle at least. Yeah. And also, it's not just BTC in the market, it's everything else. And BTC typically does not go up that much, right, compared to other things. And then when you have all these other things going up and you have so much paper wealth, it gets to a point where it's like, okay, everyone wants to start taking profits. And then there's not the demand in now. Especially in the long tail of things. So it doesn't mean, just because BTC may fare well, which it typically does, it fares better than other things in the bear market, doesn't mean your favorite thing is not going to absolutely crater by 90+%. It absolutely will. Because your favorite thing is like most likely a one cycle thing, where by the time the next cycle rolls around, no one cares about it anymore. And there's plenty of those. It's just a graveyard. It really is a graveyard of, but what I think people don't realize is that markets are forward-looking as well. So the reason why BTC went from 26K to 35K was because the market realized that it had not priced in the ETF yet. Because if people remember, there was a fake news that kind of ended up being taken as true news that the spot BTC ETFs were approved. Yeah. And that set BTC in literally like 10 minutes from 26K to 30K. And what that showed the market was that, one, people are underpricing the ETF, right? It's not priced in yet, and the market is inefficient. And two, the money's there to pump something, right? Yeah. So, of course, we went back down to 27K, but then a couple of weeks later, or a few weeks later, we were at 35K. So the market's being forward-looking means that by the time the ETF actually rolls around, right, or by the time kind of the hype cycle kind of finishes here, we go much higher than we otherwise would have because of that, because the narrative kind of pushes you higher. But in terms of a stabilizing effect, I think it can. But again, it's not going to stabilize your favorite shitcoin. It's going to stabilize BTC and probably ETH to an extent, because ETH is going to get a spot ETF as well, I believe, like not too long after. But everything else, right, is not going to have the same effect on, because the ETFs are not buying your shitcoins. They're buying BTC and ETH, right? So that wealth effect, in my opinion, is not going to trickle down either, because if you think about who's actually buying an ETF, they're doing it in their retirement accounts with money that they can't access, right, to pull out to buy the shitcoins with, because they can only buy other things that they're allowed to in their retirement account, right? They can't send it to, an exchange and start buying these other kind of things in a tax-advantaged way. They can do it if they've got like a self-managed retirement account, things like that. But the whole point of ETFs is that it's better from a tax-advantaged perspective and obviously liquidity perspective and all those sorts of things like that. So yeah, I think people really need to keep that in mind, that just because BTC and ETH may get stabilized by an ETF, it means nothing for your shitcoins. It may mean that the hype drives them up in the bull market, but in the bear market, they're still going down the same as they always have. So I think that the cycle, we call it the 4-year cycle in crypto, right, has pretty much played out exactly the same this time, but it's actually accelerated, which I wouldn't say it worries me, but it kind of gives me pause, because during this year, especially even at the start of the year, I had the same thesis. I'm like, you know what, this year is going to be like 2019. We're basically in a crab sideways market. We have a bit of a pump because it's like we just came off a brutal bear market and people are itching to, get back into the market, but it's too early because there's this concept of time-based kind of capitulation, which basically means you need enough time to pass for people to forget the pain and then start buying again. So really it was just like the money that was already in crypto. It wasn't new money coming in at the beginning of 2023. But now that we have the ETF stuff, that's changed the calculus where, as I said, like the market has brought forward the cycle, because I didn't expect BTC to go and maintain above 30K till probably next year, but it's brought it forward by about 3 months now. So if that's the case, you could reasonably expect the cycle to be at least 3 to 6 months shorter than it otherwise would have been. Because if the hype gets too ahead of itself too quickly, it's going to burn itself out. And I actually think that we may have seen a kind of glimpse of that in the 2021 cycle, because we had the first peak in May 2021, which I still consider to be the real peak. Because if you actually look at what drove us up to November 2021, the second peak, it was degen leverage. And it wasn't just the retail investors, it was the big money that all blew up. It was the FTX and SBF, it was 3 Arrows Capital, it was DCG, it was the Terra stuff, right? So if you look at it like that, and you see that really the second top was just buoyed by fraud, essentially, and fake money, then you can count May 2021 as the real top, right? Which means the last cycle was actually a faster cycle than usual as well, right? Because if you actually look at every metric except price, May 2021 is where all of them peaked, including retail interest in crypto. So I think what ended up happening was that we saw the NFT bull market, obviously, in the second half of 2021, and the alt layer ones as well. But again, that was driven by the crypto money, the crypto native money that was still in, not the retail, not new retail money coming in, and all the fraud. So if that's the case, that means that we could potentially see the peak of this cycle be maybe just the second half of next year instead of in 2025. So that's why I say it doesn't worry me, so to speak, because to be honest, I'm playing, that's how I'm actually just going to play it myself, to be honest, that I'm going to assume it's going to be an earlier cycle this time. But at the same time, I feel like it depends on what you're in, because typically these things will kind of like rotate even as the market's coming off the tops. Like even if BTC and ETH top, other things may pump for like another 6 months or something like that and give you like chance to exit those. But it's very hard to tell. Obviously, this is why investing is so hard. And I stick to just the principle of like dollar cost averaging in, dollar cost averaging out, sell when stuff's crazy, buy when stuff's quiet, sort of thing. But yeah, the cycles are definitely changing. And I think a big reason is because people love to say we're so early with crypto. BTC and ETH aren't early if you look at them as in terms of market cap, right? BTC is about to be fully integrated into the TradFi system via this ETF. It's not early anymore. It's not early anymore. Like BTC will be $1 trillion if it goes back to its all-time high in market cap, right? So it's definitely not early anymore. But if you look at the long tail of stuff, sure, it can be early, right? But then you're just doing pretty much the same thing VCs do. You're just basically investing in early stage projects, hoping to make a large multiple. I think ETH is I'm not to say that I'm obviously bullish on these things, but if you're looking at the kind of like returns you're going to get and kind of like previous cycles, ETH and BTC have matured so much at this point, especially, and with the ETF stuff, that's like the final step in my mind for BTC reaching mainstream adoption in terms of price action. In terms of like using the products themselves, we're nowhere near that. Like people using on-chain products on Ethereum or layer 2s, we are absolutely nowhere near that. I would say that we're actually probably at 2013 or earlier levels of adoption there still, right? But if you're looking at price, yeah, no, I don't think so. And that's why the cycles, I think, are going to get shorter, brought forward for BTC and ETH especially. And then also it'll stabilize over time. And we're probably not going to get those violent cycles for BTC and ETH. Maybe for that smaller things because they're just smaller. But for BTC and ETH, I don't think we're going to see those violent cycles. I would ideally like to see just BTC and ETH doing exactly what the stock market does, right? Where all the not the individual stocks, like the indexes, for example, like the S&P 500, just slowly going up, and then from time to time, with the broader economy, it sells off, right, and then goes up. Because you mentioned the macro stuff, and this is one final point that I actually wanted to hit on. I still don't think that until we get probably the ETF and until it bakes for a while, that crypto cares about the macro stuff at all. It's too small, right? It's too small. It's too irrelevant to the world financial system. Yes, there's kind of like obviously a lot of turmoil here and there, but it's not as bad as all the doomers would have you believe as well. Inflation came down. It's funny because inflation peaked in June last year. That's when ETH bottomed, right? And since then, everyone's been saying, we're going to crash again. We're going to go down again. The only time we crashed near that was FTX collapsing. And FTX collapsing couldn't even get ETH to a new low. And BTC went slightly lower, right? But since then, it's been basically up, even though this entire year, everyone's been saying, imminent recession, the world's going to fall apart, everything's going to zero. But don't get me wrong, there are people suffering, right? And the middle class is being eroded. But when you look at the market and who's actually buying, like rich people keep their money in assets, right? They buy assets. So if the middle class is eroding and you have like just poor and rich and over time, that doesn't really affect assets because the rich are buying all the assets, right? So yes, it sucks for the middle class, it sucks for the poorer people. But if you're looking at it with just an objective investor hat on, that's why the market's still going up, because the rich people who have the money, they're still going to bid assets.
Still got money.
Yeah, exactly. They still got money, and they're still affected by the inflation of obviously the dollar, and then when rates go down and stuff like that as well. So they obviously want to hold hard assets. That's why people hold BTC. That's why people hold ETH. And then if they want to do kind of like riskier things, like go down the risk curve with these smaller projects, they do that as well. And that's why you see in the broader markets as well, like people do that. And also in the broader markets, like outside of crypto, the retirement accounts count for a lot, especially in the US. That's just a constant funnel of money going into stocks, like non-stop, like a constant. That's not going to stop because that's the retirement plan for everyone, right? Same in Australia with the superannuation scheme and things like that. So if you look at it like that, and then you add BTC to that with the ETF, and then even if people only allocate 1% of it to BTC, all that money is like tens of trillions of dollars going into it, and then 1% of that is still a substantial sum. So that's kind of how I view it broadly. But whether it's good, bad, or other, I don't think it matters, because when you're investing, you can't look at things as good or bad. You have to look at things as objectively as possible, because if you start looking at things as good or bad and you start doing like moral investing, you can do it. But if your aim is to make money, that's not the best way to make money. And that's just the truth, right? Not that I kind of, I guess, condone it or are happy about it, but I think people need to come to terms with that if they want to be a good investor. Why I tend to, outside of the angel investing stuff, I'm extremely concentrated with the things that I buy. But everyone has their own strategy. I personally think that staked ETH is a good strategy because I believe ETH is a store of value and a money. I know that's maybe a controversial topic for certain people, but I believe it is. I believe it is on par with BTC in that respect. It's just behind because it hasn't existed for, I guess, like 6 years of BTC's life. So it's behind in like liquidity profile, network effect, all that sorts of stuff. But BTC and ETH are the only things that I would consider to be something that I would hold for decades, right? And ETH to me is superior, not just because of staking, but because I just like obviously much more bullish on the Ethereum ecosystem as a whole and driving value to ETH than I am on Bitcoin. But I think either or is like you can't really go wrong in that respect from a preservation perspective. But I would say that even though I'm in sort of wealth preservation, I still have sides of it where I am accumulating wealth. Like, as I said, the other things that I own probably forever over time against fiat. That's what I kind of expect. So like, for example, I mean, people use the example of gold as being that kind of example that I just think that BTC and ETH are like much better gold if you want to look at it from that perspective. So that's how I generally kind of think about things. But it's kind of funny when looking at it and looking at people's reaction to me saying, oh, it's ETH, it's staked, right? Especially my super fund, that stuff like that. Like, isn't that risky? I was like, no, I actually don't consider ETH to be that risky of an asset anymore. The other stuff is obviously, but ETH and BTC, I would consider them to be much safer than most of the stock market at this point in time.
So there's Anthony Sassano on why he is so passionately bullish on Ethereum and remains optimistic about Bitcoin's future. His unique perspective, rooted in over a decade of experience in the crypto space and his substantial personal investments, provides a compelling case for Ethereum's potential. Through his analysis of the upcoming crypto cycle and the potential impact of Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs on the market, Anthony offers valuable insights for both seasoned and new investors. Remember, if you're eager to stay informed about the latest trends, predictions, and breaking news in the crypto world, don't forget to subscribe to my daily 5-minute crypto newsletter. It's an essential resource for anyone looking to enhance their crypto investment strategies. Join over 20,000 subscribers by clicking the first link in the description and entering your email. You'll be joining a community of informed crypto enthusiasts, gaining access to expert insights and on-chain data breakdowns. Stay ahead in the dynamic world of cryptocurrency. Anyway guys, hope you all enjoyed today's video and that provided you with some value. I'll see you all in the next one, and as always, all the best.